welcome to Defcon 3. I'm KT McFarland. The United States military will continue to fly over the South China Sea, despite recent reports revealing that Beijing has deployed surface-to-air missiles to an island in this hotly contested region. Well, that's coming from the commander of the United States Navy's 7th Fleet. And he told reporters he wished the situation in the region wasn't portrayed as the United States versus China. Joining me now with his analysis on the situation is Dan Blumenthal, Director of Asian Studies and Resident Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Welcome, Dan. And let me get right to the question. The U.S. Navy says, well, this isn't a U.S.-China, but China's asking the same question, and they're giving a different answer. They're saying, you bet it is. It is China versus the United States.
Well, that's exactly right. And the Chinese government, even as their foreign minister comes here to Washington, D.C., is being defiant and basically saying, this is Chinese territory. What we're doing in Woody Island is exactly the same thing as the U.S. deploying military forces to the sovereign state of Hawaii. So they're being very clear about how they feel about the South China Sea.
But, you know, the problem, Dan, is, though, that the United States does have a naval base in Hawaii, right? That is American territory. It's an American state. But we don't claim the sea lanes between Hawaii and the west coast of the United States as American ocean, an American territory. And yet the Chinese look as if that's what they're starting to do, that they're claiming that ocean, the South China Sea, that's between these islands and mainland China, as if it's some internal Chinese lake.
Well, that's exactly right. So there's two issues. One is that the islands upon which the military forces are being deployed are in dispute. Hawaii is not in dispute. The Paracel Islands are in dispute with other nations around the Paracel Islands. So that's issue number one, and the Chinese are just claiming them now as their own. Issue number two is good order in the maritime waters, and we have always allowed countries and taken the interpretation that the sea lanes around Hawaii and our sovereign territory are those for the peaceful use of everybody else, and the Chinese are not doing so.
So where does this go from here? I mean, the Chinese are going to continue to build on these islands. They're going to continue to base naval vessels and aircraft, military aircraft on these islands. They're continuing to say, this is ours, stay away. And what does the United States do? And does this end up being a crisis between the United States and China?
Well, it's beginning to be a crisis because we have very different interests in the South China Sea. We primarily have an interest in the South China Sea not being a Chinese lake. So much of our own trade goes through the South China Sea and the world's trade. But we also have an interest in a certain peaceful order in Asia and standing up for our friends and our allies. So I think we can do two things. One is be more active diplomatically and help our friends who are being pushed around by China figure out how to settle the disputes amongst themselves so there's a united front with respect to China. And the other is to be more forceful in terms of our military exercises and military deployments that says to China, we will not acquiesce in this becoming a Chinese lake.
You know, Dan, so many times international crises end up being shooting wars, not because anybody wanted it, but because a lot of accidents and miscalculations were made. Is this the sort of situation where the United States and the Chinese could start firing on each other?
Well, if we keep going down this path, I think it's more likely because the Chinese there's no pushback, and the Chinese will keep pressing and pressing until they press on something that really matters to the United States or one of our allies. If we are very clear about what our interests are, our national security interests in what the South China Sea should be, and we're very clear that we will defend those interests, then we can deter China and have them stop probing and pressing until they actually probe on something that really matters to us or one of our allies.
Well, thank you so much for that analysis, Dan Blumenthal from the American Enterprise Institute. I'm going to make a prediction, Dan, and that is that the next president of the United States is going to be stuck with an even bigger problem than the current one is with regard to...
Unfortunately, I think you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, and if you want to find out more about this information on this issue, go to foxnews.com, where we have everything you ever needed to know about China and the South China Sea. Thanks for watching Defcon 3.